Welcome to another edition of the Fieldhouse podcast. I'm your host, Sam Vecenie. Today on the line, I had to get someone who lives out here on the West Coast with me to chat, given the fact that we have all of this news with Arizona. I didn't want to bring back Aaron Torres so quickly after having him on the podcast last week, so I had to go outside of the Fieldhouse family to discuss everything that happened yesterday with Arizona. I brought on Jeff Eisenberg from over at Yahoo Sports. Jeff, how's it going, buddy?
I'm good. How are you, Sam?
I am all right, man. It is it's a fun time of year. We're actually just kind of getting into conference tournament season. The Valley starts in earnest today with the quarterfinals. The Big Ten has started 2 days ago, really, with some of the high major games that went on over the course of the last couple days. How about Rutgers, man, beating Indiana last night? That was fun.
I mean, anytime you can watch 3 Rutgers games in 3 days, who would turn that down?
Oh, man. I love that Rutgers team. I don't know why. They're just very fun defensively to me. Let's go on ahead, though, and talk about the story of the day, and that is the Arizona Wildcats. They got some pretty great news yesterday. Whenever Sean Miller, it was decided that he is going to continue to coach the team. He gave a very stern 4.5-minute speech, I would say is the best way to put it, but also a very composed speech, a very, very strongly worded speech that I think is going to be very interesting to see how everyone reacts to it in the course of the coming days. Let's also talk about the fact that Allonzo Trier was cleared by the NCAA yesterday over his, I guess it was a remnant of the past performance-enhancing drug that he took, and you can get into a bit more detail on that, given the fact that you spoke to some specialists about it. Beyond that, we'll talk about Virginia-Louisville and what was probably the most bizarre finish I've ever seen in my entire life, and we'll talk a bit about some of the other goings-on this weekend within college basketball. But first, Jeff, how's it going, man?
It's good. It's definitely it hasn't been a particularly good season of West Coast basketball this year, as you are well aware, but it's been an interesting one between Arizona, some of the stuff at UCLA early in the season, SC, and just kind of a lot of off the court stories more than on the court this year.
Yeah, the off the court on that side of the spectrum, or really on this side of the country, has really dominated West Coast basketball, and I think we should probably just jump right into Arizona. What did you make of Sean Miller's statement yesterday to the media where he went on for 4.5 minutes? He flat out said, I did not have any part in paying $100,000 to DeAndre Ayton. He said that the ESPN report was wrong in no uncertain terms, essentially, and then went on to state that he did have a past conversation about potentially being involved with paying a player, but that player did not go to Arizona, and who knows what happened from there. But Jeff, what was your overall impression from everything you saw with Sean Miller yesterday?
I guess the strength of his statement was what stood out to me most. I mean, he left no wiggle room whatsoever when it came to either the DeAndre Ayton discussion in the ESPN story, or like just in regards to really any form of cheating that the Arizona program has been accused of. And I think it's a statement that could potentially work in his favor or could potentially work against him, depending on how the FBI investigation plays out. I think for the moment, that strong of a statement gave Arizona the plausible deniability back that it needed to reinstate him, and so it works in his favor. I just think it'll be interesting because I certainly don't think he's out of the woods yet with Book Richardson still, that trial still out there, and the potential for testimony against Sean, and then even just some of the other things we've seen with Joe Pasternak's name coming up, the former Arizona assistant who's now at UCSB. I just think you can't say that Sean Miller is in the clear until this FBI investigation is over, and we might be months, if not years, away from that fact being the case.
So, yeah, I mean, I talked a little bit about the questions that deservedly should be raised within this report on Sunday whenever we had the podcast here with Seth Davis. And, some of the issues here include the fact that Christian Dawkins has never really been associated with DeAndre Ayton. I think that both of us would agree on that, right?
No question. I mean, there have been a number of different people who have been associated with DeAndre Ayton over the years, but Christian Dawkins was not one of them.
Yeah, and then there's also just the timeline issue that ESPN has now corrected 3 times since this story went live. You can go onto their website, espn.com/ESPN/corrections, where you see in February 2014, SportsCenter Talkback, ESPN used the wrong year in discussing the timeline in a story about telephone conversations between Arizona coach Sean Miller and Christian Dawkins, a key figure in the FBI's investigation into college basketball corruption. Sources told ESPN the call in question was made, and this is a parenthetical for me, originally this statement said in spring 2016. At some point over the course of the day after this went public on February 25th, the word spring was dropped. So sources told ESPN the call in question was made in 2016. It went to, but that still doesn't really make sense given what we know about everything that has happened with the wiretapping and everything that has happened in regard to DeAndre Ayton's recruitment and commitment to Arizona. So additional reporting confirmed that ESPN was correct in a February 24th SportsCenter video talkback, which stated that Arizona coach Sean Miller and Christian Dawkins, a key figure in the FBI's investigation into college basketball corruption, spoke in 2017. A correction of that report issued February 25th misstated that conversation in question took place in 2016. ESPN stands by the reporting of the story on SportsCenter and ESPN digital media. That raises so many questions on just how clear they should have been in actually reporting this on last Friday night. We're a week out from when this happened.
Yeah, when you have a story like that where it seems apparent that ESPN did not hear the actual wiretap. So when you are going off of somebody else's word, you have to be so certain that you have every detail of that story right. And for them to have multiple corrections, that obviously throws into question the veracity of the whole story. And it's so bad in a situation where it's so bad in any story, but it's especially bad with a story where it throws someone's job and career into question. So that's concerning. Obviously, the fact that I don't think that Sean Miller would be speaking with Christian Dawkins about this particular thing, about $100,000 payment, it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense that would be the point person. Like, that's not DeAndre Ayton's guy. It's not who you would go to in that situation. So yeah. I don't know why Sean Miller would be speaking to a third party about that particular topic. There's just a lot of questions, and to throw corrections on top of that, it does not make that ESPN story as believable as it would be under normal circumstances.
Yeah, it's, and I don't want to disparage like Mark Schlabach, who I think has done great work in the past, but Agreed. I mean, he's not a college basketball guy. Like, this is the kind of report that someone who, is tangentially connected to college basketball would make, where he hears a couple of names and doesn't really know what they mean. You know what I mean?
I do. Like, I think a lot of us have either written about DeAndre Ayton in the past and understand, who kind of the point people were at various times in that recruitment, or like at the very least have been around AAU basketball enough to know that wouldn't have been Christian Dawkins. And that's something that I would hope would raise a red flag if one of us had been in that situation. So, I don't fault Mark for that reason. I just think he was in a tough spot, and I don't know. I would be curious to know what he thinks now, but obviously that Twitter account has been silent for a few days.
Yeah, like I won't divulge the name of the media member. I texted immediately after the story went public, but just kind of looking back through my text messages right now, I think that story went public at like maybe 8 our time, right? On Friday night, something like that.
So. Yep.
And, I look back and, just kind of like reading through my messages, like our biggest question was, Christian Dawkins was never DeAndre Ayton's guy. Like that didn't make sense. That just doesn't, it doesn't add up. It doesn't, doesn't follow to us. And that's what he said immediately. He was like, no, this doesn't add up to me. And then like the other question too was only $100,000. Like, I mean, that's like a joke that's been made. Oh, it's a good deal for DeAndre Ayton to be on Arizona's campus for only $100,000. Yeah, I don't think it actually was $100,000 if it ended up happening. Put it that way. That number doesn't make sense given what we know about what Brian Bowen made, or allegedly was paid, given the legal documents that we have access to released by the U.S. Attorney's Office. It just doesn't. A lot of it just didn't add up in a way that if you covered this sport regularly, you would kind of know. You know.
Yeah, I agree with that. The only thing I would say with that is that Brian Bowen was so late in the game that I feel like it potentially drives up a prospect's value in such a situation, both from a financial and from a which schools are recruiting him standpoint. But yes, nonetheless.
Market economics, baby.
Right. Right, exactly. But nonetheless, I agree with you. There were just a lot of red flags there. And, as the more reporting came out with the timeline and everything, the more apparent it was that there was something for Sean to dispute. And then for him to go at it as hard as he did with that prepared statement, I think that it made it more feasible for Arizona to stand behind him and for Arizona to, at least give itself into the offseason before they decide what to do long term.
So I guess, that's where I wanted to go next. Are you surprised that Sean Miller is coaching right now?
I mean, if you asked me this a week ago, yes. If you asked me this earlier this week, no.
But like even with what you know, and I'm sorry to interrupt, but like even with what you know now, are you surprised that Arizona is not just punting this to the offseason and saying, you know what, Sean, we stand behind you, but we just want to put you on administrative leave. We have a very credible, qualified coach who was just in our league last year, and Lorenzo Romar. We just need to do more investigating. Like, does it surprise you they didn't go that route?
It doesn't, only because of how they've handled this, since the get-go. Like, I mean, to me, Sean Miller is as detail-oriented and as hands-on of a coach as I can think of across the country, certainly one of them anyway.
Yeah.
So the idea that he had no idea what his right-hand man and longtime assistant Book Richardson was doing on the recruiting trail, to me, makes no sense. So, if Arizona wanted to believe that and made excuses to believe that in September in order to keep him coaching this season, I see no reason why they wouldn't try to take advantage of the plausible deniability they have now with the ESPN story and, again, keep him in that spot. It's pretty clear to me that because of the amount that he's won and truly because of the trust that he's probably endeared in that community and at that university, that Arizona wants Sean Miller to be its basketball coach. And so unless they find themselves in a situation where, they basically have no choice but to let him go, I think he will continue to be their basketball coach.
Yeah, I think that part of it is not surprising to me either. And I just kind of phrased the question because I thought it was an interesting discussion point. But at the same time, they've been defiant this whole time, as you mentioned. So I would expect them to continue to be defiant throughout this process. And whether or not that leads to Sean Miller being the coach of Arizona for the next 10 years, or it means that everyone in their athletic administration is going down for defending Sean Miller, I'm not sure there's much of a middle ground there now, right? Like, if it's found that Sean played any role in the purported crimes that Book Richardson is alleged to have committed, or if it is found that Sean Miller offered Christian Dawkins $100,000 for some player, we're going to find out real quickly, I think. And if that is the case, Sean's career for now is put on pause, or at least, over for 5 to 10 year period. And then, Arizona's athletic department, I think, is in a significantly, hindered place where they're probably going to have to move on, I think.
Yeah, I think there's three outcomes to this, or three potential outcomes to this story. There's one where no new incriminating evidence comes out for Sean. He gets it rolling again in a year or two, and he coaches at Arizona for a long, long time, and we forget not forget, but a lot of this stuff gets put behind him. The second one is the obvious, where more incriminating evidence comes out against Sean. He loses his job, and like you said, I think the Arizona administrators who have thrown their support behind him time after time now would be putting themselves into jeopardy in that situation. But then the third one, which I also think is a pretty strong possibility, is I think this is going to hinder Arizona's ability to recruit for a pretty substantial amount of time. Like, they've already
hold on, because I do want to ask you about that. That was literally going to be my next question, so I'm just going to phrase it now. I guess, do you think there's a path forward for Sean Miller as head coach? And I think that that's the place you have to start, right, is with recruiting.
I think there's a path forward, but I don't think it's going to be easy, and I think it would require a lot of patience on Arizona's part. Like, I don't think that anyone in that position is going to be able to recruit the way Arizona has, given the potential, given the investigation hanging over the program and the potential NCAA violations that it could lead to. I mean, we saw it with North Carolina, and it ended up working out in their favor in some ways. Like, you could argue that it led to their national championship, but they weren't competing with Duke or Kentucky, for the top flight prospects in the country for a few years while the academic scandal hung over that program. And I think it would be the same way for Arizona, even if nothing else comes out against Sean. I think it would be hard to convince a one and done level prospect that you want to go to Arizona when there's a pretty decent chance that either more incriminating evidence comes out and the coaching staff gets cleaned out, or that the program ends up on with NCAA sanctions and can't play in the postseason. So until this FBI investigation is over, and until we see what the NCAA is going to do with it, I think Arizona's going to have a hard time recruiting at the level that they have throughout Sean's tenure. And it's going to be up to Sean to see if he can find other ways to win. And it's going to be up to that Arizona administration to see if it wants to show patience, as it already has, or if they want a fresh start and to try to expedite things by getting someone else in there.
Yeah, I mean, this was a team that early in the season had already received commitments from Javon Quinterly, Sharif O'Neal, and Brandon Williams. Only Brandon Williams remains. They were expected to have received commitments, or receive a commitment from Nasir Little, if you remember. He's now going to North Carolina, but Arizona was rumored to be the spot for him throughout the course of the regular season. Or early in the season, before the season started, I'm sorry. And then they were pretty in on Devonair Dutrieve from Van Nuys out here in LA, and Tevian Jones, who's in Culver City out here in LA, both of whom are top 150 players in their classes. I really, really like Tevian Jones, actually. I think he's probably a little bit underrated by recruiting services. So I am a little bit, it's hard for me to see how Arizona is going to get in on the highest level guys. I agree with you wholeheartedly, but part of the narrative recently has been like, Sean Miller wasn't recruiting to the level that, he had been earlier in his tenure. And I just don't think that's true. And Sean has proven to be a pretty good recruiter in the past. Now, we'll find out what level of involvement Book Richardson had in that, what level of involvement Dropping Bags had in that, potentially, given the allegations. But I think that there is a path forward. It's just going to take a lot.
Yeah, I just think they have to be a little bit more creative. Like, I don't think you're going to get a Stanley Johnson or an Aaron Gordon or some of the other elite kids. I don't think that's going to be who Arizona is for the next few years. But if they can avoid more negative headlines in the FBI investigation, try to look maybe more at that 3- and 4-star recruit who might be there for a few years and build that way, I still think Arizona can be relevant. I just think that it's going to be more challenging, and there's a more narrow path for Sean than there might have been otherwise.
Let's move on and talk about Allonzo Trier. He's the other big story here happening around that program. He was suspended last Friday. Is that correct, Jeff? Or Thursday?
I think it was Thursday. I think it was the day before the 8 news came out.
So suspended last Thursday for a recurrence of the same performance-enhancing drug, Ostarine, within his bloodstream. You wrote a story on that where you talked to specialists throughout. Well, I'm just going to let you say it because I don't exactly know who you talked to, having read the article like 24 hours ago. So tell me who you talked to and tell me why you're a bit surprised that Allonzo Trier is actually back and playing for Arizona.
So I talked to a number of anti-doping experts and performance-enhancing drug experts who are very familiar with Ostarine, which is what Allonzo Trier's attorney told us that he was using, or that he, I should say, inadvertently used in 2016. And basically what the experts I spoke to said was if he used the drug inadvertently in 2016, as he said, so it wasn't like something he was using for months and months and months, it was an inadvertent use in a drink, according to his attorney, that there is no way that there would still be a detectable remnant of that drug still left in his body, 16 months later, especially when in between he tested negative a handful of times. Like he returned from suspension last January, so 13 months ago. And then in between testing positive again this January, he was tested a number of times and tested negative each time. So the experts that I spoke to basically called into question whether it was possible for him to have either not ingested the drug a second time prior to the second positive test, or not having taken it intentionally, or certainly a lot more than he portrayed back before the original tests in 2016. And the other thing that was pointed out to me is that the NCAA's appeals process for people who test, or for athletes who test positive for performance-enhancing drugs, like it all but encourages you to argue that it was inadvertent use and that somebody else gave you the drug without your knowledge, because like essentially the only way to get a penalty reduced is to argue one of two things, either that or that the lab messed things up. And since it's pretty hard to prove that the drug testing lab messed up, when it found a positive sample, like that's usually the recourse that an athlete will go. And I'm not saying that Allonzo Trier's story wasn't true. I don't know. I'm just saying that you certainly have incentive as an athlete in that situation to argue that it was inadvertent use. So I'm a little surprised that the NCAA reinstated him as quickly as he did. Maybe they talked to experts who felt differently. I'm certainly not nearly enough of a performance-enhancing drug expert myself to know. I just know that the experts that I talked to, one of whom is the founder of the Olympic lab at UCLA, the only WADA-accredited lab in the United States, I believe, said that he was pretty skeptical about Trier's story. So, kind of take that for what it's worth as you evaluate whether he should be on the court or not.
Those darn UCLA administrators, they're trying to hold down Arizona. They're trying to stop them from reaching the Final Four. That's what's happening here.
Clearly, I think UCLA has more than enough troubles of its own at the moment without telling its former lab directors what to say in this situation.
So I guess, what do we think of Arizona now as a basketball team? Let's take away all of the off the floor stuff. I mean, this is still a team that is 23-7. They clinched a share, at least, of the Pac-12 championship in the regular season last night with their 8-point win over Stanford. They still have DeAndre Ayton, who for me is probably one of the three best players in the country. Allonzo Trier is arguably the most efficient, high-usage scorer in the country. And they have a lot of really interesting prospecty types with Raleigh Elkins and Brandon Randolph and Dylan Smith and Emmanuel Aycott. Like, they have actual pieces here. What do we think their future holds as they go forward here into the NCAA tournament and, more soon than that, into the Pac-12 tournament?
I mean, talent for talent, man for man, there can't be more than, 2 or 3 teams better than Arizona, if that. So they certainly have a chance. I don't love how they've defended at any point this year.
Yep.
I I don't think they've defended to the level that most of Sean's best teams have. I don't think that they've consistently gotten the ball to DeAndre Ayton when they need to. Like, he is so dominant and he can do so many things, and yet you'll see him have stretches where he doesn't touch the ball. And it kind of reminds me of their Sweet 16 loss to Xavier last year when Lauri Markkanen went 11 minutes without shooting down the stretch. Yeah. So that concerns me a little bit about Arizona. It just, more than anything, like, I don't think they've played to the some of their parts, for the course of the year. And like they've been fine. Like, they're obviously they've won the Pac-12 and they're the best team in that conference for whatever that's worth this year. But I don't think that they've been as good as I was expecting them to. And like, I don't know if that's because the pieces don't fit as well as normal. Like, we've talked about this before, but playing Ristic alongside Ayton has certainly created some issues for them defensively. And, I don't think that the freshmen besides Ayton have come along as quickly as maybe I had hoped or Arizona would have hoped. So I don't know what the issue is. I'm sure some of it is the specter of the FBI investigation hanging over everything too. But I don't think Arizona is where I would have hoped that they would be heading into March before the season started.
So here will be the case I make to you to say Arizona is really, really good and has a chance to make a run. Over the last 4 games where they have had all of their pieces together. So throw away the Oregon game where Sean Miller was not there, Allonzo Trier was not there. Just they were kind of a mess that night, right? So yeah. The USC game, the Arizona State game, Oregon State, and Stanford. I think that's starting with the second half of the USC game, at least on February 10th. I think that this is the best we've seen them defend all year. The USC game, they allowed something like 0.7 points per possession in that second half. They really held down a good offensive USC team. They held Arizona State to 70 points in 72 possessions, which, as we know, Arizona State is one of the best offensive teams in the country. Oregon State, 65 points on 69 possessions. And then last night, they held Stanford to 67 points on 67 possessions. They've actually done a really, really good job recently of somehow finding a way to defend. And I think that is what they have to continue to work toward as they move into March. They need to keep going down this road of playing solid defense.
Yeah, I agree with that. I agree with the idea that if they do consistently defend at a higher level than they had for most of the course of the season, like, this is clearly a team that can make a Final Four. I mean, there's no one who they're going to play where they're going to be like, oh, that team's too talented, we can't possibly beat them. Like, they are talented enough to make a Final Four and win a national championship. Yep. I have not seen the consistency, especially at the defensive end. And it also concerns me a little bit when they don't get the ball to DeAndre consistently enough either. So I would not have Arizona in my Final Four right now, but I certainly would list them among the teams that can get there and can win a title.
And just to kind of close off of that little loop there, who do you think the best team in the West is right now?
It's probably either Arizona or Gonzaga. I would probably pick Gonzaga today, but I'd like to see the results of these conference tournaments. If Arizona gets on a roll here with everyone back, I would certainly be willing to consider Arizona. But it's one of those two teams, and I'd lean Gonzaga right now.
I think I am with you on that. Let's bounce around a little bit here. Louisville, I don't even know what to say after that loss last night. I honestly don't even know how to comprehend Louisville losing a game whenever they're up 66-62 with under a second left.
I mean, it seems staggering, and like not have it go to overtime, because like we've seen it before where you foul a guy on a 3 for some inexplicable reason and he makes the shot and makes the free throw. Like, that's one mistake. It's again an egregious one, but that's one mistake. But for you to be up by 4 with less than a second to go in a basketball game and lose in regulation is just astonishing. I don't think I've ever seen that before.
Or even the situation like what actually happened. Say like Ty Jerome makes 2 free throws and then misses it, and they get the rebound and tip it back in 0.9 seconds. Mm-hmm. Sure. Okay. let's just kind of explain what exactly happens here. So they get up 66-62 with what? I guess it's probably like a few seconds left, maybe like 7 seconds left.
Yeah, it was either 6 or 7 seconds.
And Ty Jerome comes down, shoots a three, gets fouled. Jerome makes, 2 of the 3 free throws, misses the third one intentionally, and the ball goes out of bounds. Or no, the ball does not go out of bounds. Mamadi Diakite enters the lane too quickly, so it's a lane violation. And then Louisville has to inbound the basketball. And the referee looks right at Dengadel and says, you cannot move. Like, you can see him say, you cannot move. And Dengadel moves. He tries to inbound the basketball by moving to his left. And you can't do that. You can only do that off of a made basket. And that is where the trouble just begins for Louisville, as it's now 66-64, and Virginia gets an inbound pass below their basket. They inbound the ball to DeAndre Hunter, who, Dengadel loses in a switch situation. So bad last second for Dengadel. And DeAndre Hunter banks in a 3. And that's how we have Virginia still sitting here at 27-2, still sitting here at 16-1 in the ACC. What is your reaction as this is happening? Like, I'm sitting in front of my computer. I'm like looking through my hands, oh no, I can't believe this is actually going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, I was right there with you. Like, my wife was cooking dinner, and I think I let out a yell, and she's like, "What's wrong with you?" Yeah, I mean, like, I guess my reaction was twofold. Like, one, this was a horrendous way to lose a basketball game, but two, like, Louisville might have lost more than just a basketball game here. Like, they are right on the bubble. And the thing that is holding them back from making the NCAA tournament is that they haven't really beaten anyone particularly good. Like, they have a win over Florida State and a couple wins over Virginia Tech, which, again, nothing wrong with that. Those are NCAA tournament teams. But, like, they don't have a signature win to fall back on it. And this was it. They outplayed Virginia the entire game. They were up 13 midway through the second half, 10 with 6 minutes to go, 4 with less than 1 second to go. And to lose that basketball game and lose it in regulation and, now be facing potentially a must-win situation at NC State or having to do some damage in the ACC tournament in order to get a bid. I mean, that is staggering, the implications of that collapse last night. Yeah,
they're now sitting at 19-11, as you mentioned. I mean, what is their best win right now? It's probably at Florida State, right? I mean, they did sweep Virginia Tech, which I think will help, but I mean, at Florida State's probably maybe at Virginia Tech is their best win.
One of those two. I mean, they really haven't done much besides beating Virginia Tech and Florida State. There is not a whole lot there. The only saving grace for them, I think, is like they also haven't lost to anybody who is an NCAA tournament contender. Like, their worst loss is probably Syracuse, who still might get in. So, like, that helps them a little bit. But, I mean, if they lose to NC State, they'd be 19-12, 9-9 in the conference. Not a whole lot on their profile. I think they'd have to do something in the ACC tournament to get in.
I mean, should we read too much into this on the David Padgett side? Like, how does this happen where, they end up in so many bad situations in large part due to mental mistakes? Because that is what it comes down to, right? Like, so much of what happened down the stretch there was a mental mistake. And it's hard for me to look past that. Like, it's hard for me to imagine the Louisville administration looks past that whenever deciding if David Padgett should get this job. I think that ship has sailed.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I don't know if David Padgett is directly at fault here, but I will say it was notable that Tony Bennett was on the sideline screaming that the player can't move, whereas Padgett obviously didn't warn, or I assume anyway, didn't warn Dengadel that he can't move. And then, I'm not going to blame David Padgett for Louisville fouling on a three-pointer for absolutely no reason on the possession before it. Like, your players should know that. But that is also the type of thing that a coach will scream at his players or tell them in the huddle or whatever it is to avoid that mental mistake. And so, I don't know if that did or didn't happen at Louisville. Maybe it did. But sometimes when you have enough of these mental errors, like, it's not only on the players, it's also a coaching staff not doing a good enough job of, either preparing kids for that moment or of, in the moment, making sure that they know what to do.
Yeah, it's just the kind of mistakes down the stretch you never see from a Virginia, for instance. You never see it from a Villanova. You don't, see it from a Cincinnati even. And people complain about Mick Cronin all the time as well, just due to the offensive structures that they do. So I am where do we go here for Louisville? Like, who do they even look to hire this offseason now?
Well, I think they make Chris Mack turn it down, which I would think that he would, given the the uncertainty going forward with Louisville. After that, I don't know. I mean, I'm trying to think of who the next person on that list would be. I think
for me it's Greg Marshall, but I don't know if they'll do that.
I don't know if they'll do that, and we know how much money it's going to take to get Greg Marshall. And Louisville has that money, but is that the direction that they go? I think Louisville needs somebody who is absolutely not implicated in the FBI investigation whatsoever. They cannot hire another coach with any chance of a scandal. Which again, I'm not saying. I know that both Greg and Chris Mack had players that were named this past week, but I don't think I would be afraid of a scandal in either case. I'm just not sure if I was either of them that I would leave my current situation for the Louisville job, even though the Louisville job is a better one. But why would I want to go somewhere that is potentially going to get hammered by the NCAA and it's still under the FBI cloud? I'm just not sure I would make that move if I was either of them.
Yeah, so I've been trying to really think a little bit outside the box on who they could go after. I still think they should probably run Chris Beard. They should make a run at him and give him an offer he can't refuse. And I know that Beard is a Texas guy and more of a Southern guy, but I think Beard is one of the 20 best coaches in the country, to be honest. And I would just go for that. It's hard to find those relatively younger coaches who don't have any track record of any sort of cheating, any sort of scandal. It's just a really difficult kind of middle ground to hit. Do you try and offer Mike Bray $6 million a year?
I mean, I guess you could. That wouldn't be the worst choice in the world, certainly. I think Mike Bray has done an excellent job at Notre Dame, and if you offer him that kind of money, he'd certainly have to consider it. And he's probably one of the the least associated with the scandal coaches that you could find. So I guess that's a possibility. It's a tough spot for them if Chris Mack doesn't turn them down. I think a lot of the name coaches out there this year, I don't want to say they're beneath Louisville, but I don't think they would be getting considered for a top 10 job were it not for the scandal. And I think a lot of the candidates that they would normally go after, I'm just not sure that they're going to be able to get. So it would almost benefit them in some ways to keep David Padgett as an interim coach for another year and try to see where they are with the scandal after that. But obviously, that uncertainty just destroys your recruiting, and they do have to go forward. It's just not a great time for them to be able to make a hire.
Yeah, no, it's really not, and I don't even really have a great feel for where they go from here. One aspect I've been trying to think about is what NBA assistants do you try and go after to make this get done? I think that Arizona would have been in a really good position to be able to do that, right? Arizona could have gone after Luke Walton with the Lakers, and then realistically, if Luke said no, could have gone after Miles Simon. And totally avoided the specter of the scandal, right? If they wanted to, they could have tried to go out and hire a good college coach as well. There are a ton of options open to you whenever you're that kind of blue blood program. But I don't think Kermit Davis hire is getting anyone excited. I don't think Eric Musselman, I think, is an incredible basketball coach. I don't think an Eric Musselman deal is, getting anyone really excited.
No, or even like a Steve Forbes. Like, I really like Steve Forbes, and I think he's going to be successful somewhere. But I'm not sure if like that jump from East Tennessee State to Louisville, I don't know if that gets that fan base excited either. I love Musselman. I think he's done an outstanding job at Nevada, and I think he'd probably do well at Louisville. But under normal circumstances, I'm not sure that that's who Louisville would hire. I think they'd be able to aim higher than that.
Well, you know what the wild one is like Kevin Keats makes sense on a lot of levels.
It does.
But I just can't see them associating with Pitino.
They can't.
I can't.
They can't. Like, they can, like, I totally agree with you that he'd be a good fit for that job, but they have to go outside of the Pitino tree. They have to. Yeah. Like, just the optics alone, I don't think you can. Let's say that they hired Kevin and then something happens in a couple years. I mean, you'd clean out that entire athletic department again if that happened.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. Let's bounce around just a little bit more here and talk about some of the things that we've seen. We talked about the Big Ten tournament a little bit at the top with Rutgers beating Indiana. What do we think is going to happen in this Big Ten tournament over the weekend? As we speak, Michigan State is in a relative battle right now with Wisconsin. It's 51-51 with 8 minutes left in the game. And, Michigan-Nebraska, the biggest game of Nebraska's season, is coming as soon as we finish recording this. And Penn State has beaten Ohio State twice this year, going for the trifecta. Can they do it? We'll see. What do we think of everything that is going to happen over the course of the next few days in the Big Ten?
I think there are two storylines that matter, at least to me anyway. One is, can Michigan State or Purdue win the thing and put themselves in position for a 1 seed potentially? And then two is the Nebraska storyline. I mean, Nebraska to me is as fascinating of a bubble team as we have in the country this year. They're 13-5 in a power conference. I mean, when was the last time that a 13-5 power conference team didn't make the NCAA tournament? The only one that I can think of is Washington a few years back when it won the Pac-12 and didn't make the tournament. I want to say that was 2011, but only once since the Big Ten expanded to 18 games has a team that won even 11 games not made the NCAA tournament, and that was Ohio State a couple years ago. And yet Nebraska has a very, very real chance of missing the tournament if they, at the very least, don't win today. They didn't do a whole lot out of conference. They were very close against Kansas, didn't get it done. Very close against Creighton, didn't get it done. They faced all three of the Big Ten's top teams only once and all on the road, lost all three of those games. So there's just not a whole lot there. There's just a lot of empty calories on their resume, aside from a 20-point win over Michigan earlier this year. And to me, I think they're NCAA tournament good, but I don't think their resume is NCAA tournament caliber. And I think the only way that they change that is at minimum beating Michigan today. And I mean, they might have to get to the Big Ten title game to feel good about their chances going into Selection Sunday.
Yeah, no, I think they have to get to the Big Ten championship game. I don't even know that they have to win it, because we've talked so much, and you wrote about this a little bit yesterday with the quadrant system, right?
Yeah.
I think the quadrant system is a mess in a lot of ways. We don't know exactly how this NCAA tournament committee is going to value wins, losses, quadrant 1, quadrant 2. Do they overvalue quadrant 3, quadrant 4 losses? Do they overvalue quadrant 1 wins? We just don't know. So whenever I look at what Nebraska has done so far, I kind of think they have a better chance of getting in than most bracketologists are giving them right now. Just because I do think that whenever you're talking about, for the most part, league commissioners and athletic directors at schools, it's hard for them to get past the fact that a team is 13-5 in a league like the Big Ten. And I do understand the fact that this is not on any of their team sheets. This is not any of the data they actually peruse, but it's in the back of their minds. Bruce Rasmussen at Creighton is the chair this year. There's no way he doesn't know this. It's hard to get over the fact that they look like an NCAA tournament team, in my opinion. They've been really good defensively throughout the entire year. Their offense has started to pick up over the course of recent weeks. it's just hard for me to kind of get past what we've seen from them so far. And it wouldn't surprise me if they end up in the first four where the tournament committee goes, you know what? You beat Michigan, you lost in the semifinals to Michigan State. We're going to give you a chance to earn your way in. We know that you didn't necessarily get all of the opportunities that some other schools had, both over the course of the non-conference and in conference because of the weakness of the Big Ten. But we're going to let you earn your way into the actual field of 64 by playing your way into the first four.
I would be fine. Not only would I be fine with that outcome, I think that would be an exceptionally fair outcome for Nebraska if they beat Michigan today, lost in the semifinal, and ended up in the first four. Pencil me in for that. I'm good with that. The one thing I will say is I think what the committee might not be able to look past is that Nebraska currently only has that one quadrant one victory. If there was anything we learned from the midseason bracket reveal a couple weeks ago, it was that the committee clearly seems to be valuing those quadrant one wins above anything else. How else would you explain how Oklahoma was the number 4 seed in that bracket? So that would be the thing that would concern me most for Nebraska, was that they wouldn't be looking at 13-5 and not being able to get past that. It was that they wouldn't be able to get past only beating one team in that first quadrant.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think that there are very real cases, both for and against Nebraska. It won't be the most egregious oversight in the world if Nebraska doesn't get into the NCAA tournament, particularly if they lose to Michigan. I will understand it in every way. It's hard for me to get past it in a lot of ways because this is actually a good basketball team to me.
It is.
They play well.
The way that you described using the first four is something that I wish the committee would do more of. I would love to see, someone like a Loyola Chicago, if it were to lose in the Valley title game or something, end up in the first four and just have the committee have that high quality mid-major that lost in its conference tournament, give them a chance to prove that they belong. I think everyone would take that scenario. It would make the first four more interesting to have that team facing a major conference team. I think that those teams are deserving of that opportunity, and Nebraska very much has a mid-major type resume this year. So that's kind of why I feel like they belong in that spot too. I wish that we used the first four more for that scenario. Let those teams prove they belong in the field.
And you know who another team is like this? It's Middle Tennessee.
Yeah, great call. Yeah,
Middle Tennessee right now is sitting at 24-5. They kicked, I don't know if I can swear on this podcast, they kicked the heck out of Western Kentucky last night to sweep Western Kentucky 82-64 at home. They have a home game against Marshall, who was their only loss in the Conference USA so far this year, to close out their schedule. This is a team that's really good. I know that they don't have any major wins outside of Western Kentucky. I mean, the Murray State win has held up remarkably well. Murray State is also sitting at 24-5. Vanderbilt and Mississippi were their two big non-conference wins in terms of high major results, and they didn't necessarily get a chance to see those two hold up. They competed with both USC and Miami, losing by 5 and 3 in the Diamond Head Classic over the course of the Christmas break. So this is a team that I think is just actually good at basketball. I would love to see them get in, even if they lose in what is going to be a loaded Conference USA tournament featuring Old Dominion, who's a top 70 team, featuring UAB, who's dangerous because they still have a lot of really good pieces like Chris Coakley and William Lee. Western Kentucky is just flat out talented. They're really good. Marshall is dangerous because they're so good offensively, as they showed earlier in the season by beating Middle Tennessee. I get that the resume isn't there, but this is a team that should be in the NCAA tournament, no question.
I mean, let's not forget, 2 years ago they beat Michigan State in the opening round of the tournament, and last year they beat Minnesota in a game that they were favored in. I mean, I know past year's performance isn't supposed to factor into the committee, but it should in some ways. Especially with the mid-major where they don't get a ton of opportunities to prove themselves. If I've seen them win 2 NCAA tournament games in the past 2 years, they're 24-5. 3 of those losses by 6 on a neutral to Auburn, by 5 on a neutral to USC, and by 3 on a neutral to Miami. They've beaten two major conference teams, like you said, with Vanderbilt and Ole Miss. They've dominated a pretty good Conference USA. Like, if Middle Tennessee loses in its title game by 3 points or in its semifinals by 3 points, put that team in the field. Like, I would much, 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 much rather see Middle Tennessee in the field than I would pick an 8-10 ACC team, or Oklahoma State finishing ninth in the Big 12, like whatever. Just any of those major conference teams, I would much rather see a Middle Tennessee that's had a great season be rewarded for it than someone who's mediocre in a power conference get into the field.
I agree with you there, but the last question I'm going to ask you here before I let you go: make a case for one high major team that is currently on the bubble to get into the NCAA tournament.
All right, the team I would pick is probably not in the field if the season ended today, but I would make the case that they deserve to be if they show any sort of life in the ACC tournament, and that team is Notre Dame. And I'll make that case for a couple of different reasons. The biggest one is the injuries that have befallen them and the fact that those players are now back on the court. So they have not had their best player, Bonzie Colson, for the entirety of the ACC season. And they also were missing Matt Farrell, their starting point guard and probably their second best player, for a big chunk of the season, which coincided directly with the 7-game losing streak that they had in the middle of ACC play. Before, when both those guys were healthy, they won the Maui Invitational, beating LSU and beating Wichita State in the title game. They did take a couple of bad losses in non-conference play to Ball State and Indiana, so that's going to get held against them. But Farrell is back in the lineup. Bonzie Colson came back against Pittsburgh on Wednesday. They have a golden opportunity against Virginia on the road in a game that means so much more to them on Saturday than it does to Virginia. If they win that game, I feel like they absolutely belong in the NCAA tournament. They would be 9-9 in the ACC in that case. But even if they lose to Virginia, if they look good in that loss and then win a game or two in the ACC tournament, I would love to see Notre Dame in the field. I think they are clearly an NCAA tournament caliber team when healthy. Whereas I think that you can make the case that they are a lot better than some of the other bubble teams that we're talking about, whether it's a UCLA or a Syracuse or a Washington or even the Nebraska team that we just talked about. I would take Notre Dame head-to-head at full strength over Nebraska any day of the week. So I hope that the committee, I guess, looks at Notre Dame with an open mind and looks a little bit past their numbers, especially if they have a good showing here over the course of the next week.
I mean, they're like almost unquestionably a top 30 team in the country, right? Like we think that's pretty clear.
Yeah.
Like when they're fully healthy. I mean, this is a really good basketball team. Just put them in the field. Let them do damage. I mean, we saw what they can do earlier in the season in Maui. We saw what they can do before Bonzie Colson got hurt. Let them play. Just do it. I'm begging you, NCAA tournament. Let Bonzie Colson play.
The one thing I will say is, how'd you like to be a 5 seed? You had a heck of a season. You've earned your right to be a favorite in the first round of the NCAA tournament, and then along comes Notre Dame.
So angry. I would be so angry.
I would be furious. So I don't know how you handle that, but I do agree with you that the NCAA tournament would be better with this Notre Dame team in the field.
Yeah, and look, I agree with you. They can't get in right now. If they beat Virginia on Saturday, yeah, I think you can put them in. Legit, I just full stop believe you can put them in. They would have a neutral win against Wichita State. They'd have a road win against Virginia, a home win against NC State, a road win against Syracuse, a home win against Florida State. That's a pretty good resume, like for a bubble team, even though they lost their best players during their critical stretch of the season where they had North Carolina at home, Louisville at home, Clemson on the road, Virginia Tech at home, Duke on the road, and NC State at home. Like, you had those 6 games. That was going to be the 6 games where they could really build a resume up, and they just weren't able to do it because they were hurt.
Yeah, totally agree. I mean, they do not lose to Georgia Tech. They almost beat North Carolina without some of those guys. Matt Farrell came back for a game or two and just wasn't himself. Like, I saw a picture of his ankle from the middle of that. Like, it was swollen the size of a balloon. So, like, that probably set them back. Him coming back a little bit too early there. I guess I just stand by what we said earlier. Like, Notre Dame is clearly an NCAA tournament team when at full strength. And if they give the committee any reason to even consider putting them in, I hope they do it.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree there. Jeff, tell the people where they can find your work. Tell the people what you've got coming up over the weekend and over the course of its week.
They can find my work at Yahoo Sports or at Jeff Eisenberg on Twitter. Gosh, I don't know. We have an avalanche of content coming up this week, just like everything else does with March. So, I don't know. I encourage you guys to read it, consume as much as possible. There's great stuff out there at a lot of different places this time of year.
Go follow Jeff's work. He does a great job over at Yahoo and has for a long time, I should say. This has been the Fieldhouse Podcast. We'll be back on Sunday with some more from Seth Davis and I. Until next time, though, we will talk soon. Bye.